UFC 292, Sterling versus O'Malley, full card predictions. Starting at the bottom, working our way to the top. First fight of the night is Marina Moroz taking on Karine Silva. In this one, I'm actually going to go with Marina Moroz here. Now, I'll say this to start. Karine Silva is a finisher. All of her wins have been inside the distance. She's 16-4. She has one fight that went the distance, and it was a loss. Now, if you look at Marina Moroz, on the other hand, she is 11-4, right? All four of her losses have come via decision. She's 4-4 in decisions. She has no losses by finish. Now, can Karine Silva be the first person to finish Marina Moroz? It could happen. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's certainly not, out of the question. But Marina Moroz has never been finished before. And she's fought some pretty good levels of competition. If you've seen, she's fought Jennifer Maia. Maria Agapova's all right. I mean, Mara Bueno Silva, it was a long time ago, granted. But Myra Bueno Silva beat Holly Holm. So that win has aged very well, although it was a long time ago. Still a good win to have on your record. For Marina Moroz, I just think if Silva can't find a finish here, if this fight does end up going to the cards, I do think this is a Marina Moroz. I think she can win this fight, especially as an underdog. I'm not super confident in this fight because it's women's MMA, and as everyone knows, anything can happen in women's MMA. However, it is one where I will say the underdog that hasn't been finished can go the distance and win a decision. And she is the much more experienced UFC fighter at that. She's fought, quite a few solid UFC fighters compared to Karine Silva, who hasn't fought anyone close. I mean, if you look at her level of competition in the UFC, it's been very, very poor. Poliana Botelho, not very good. Ketlin Souza, that was her first fight in the UFC. She's not very good either. And even her contender series opponent's not good. Like, she hasn't fought anyone on that level yet. So, have to go with Marina Moroz to get it done. Andrea Lee versus Natalia Silva is the second fight of the night. Now, I'm going with Natalia Silva here. I'm going to go with Natalia Silva. Now, you may say it's a little bit of a contradiction to the last fight because I just said that Karine Silva didn't fight a lot of super high levels competition. And you could say similar about Natalia Silva, but Natalia Silva has fought at least decent level of competition. If you look, she actually hasn't fought terrible competition. Jasmine Studovicius is good. She is a good fighter. She, just flat out, Jasmine Studovicius is a solid fighter, and she beat her. Teresa Bleda beat her as well, and Victoria Leonardo. So she's beating who she needs to beat. She's not beating like top level girls, like I'm talking about like top 5 level girls. But Jasmine is like, basically top 15. I don't know what she's ranked right now, but I know she's top 15. And then Blade and Leonardo were her last 2 wins, and she finished both Bleda and Leonardo. For Andrea Lee, she's hit or miss, honestly. I think that's the best way to describe her. She's very, hot and cold, so to speak. She can, she wins some, loses some, looks better in some fights, worse in some fights. She lost to Roxanne Modafferi. Listen, anyone that loses to Roxanne Modafferi, that's just not a good look. I know Roxanne Modafferi is a, UFC veteran, but like, come on, that's just real. I know it was a long time ago as well, 3 years ago, but still, it's just it's just really such a bad look to have losing to Roxanne Modafferi. Antonina Shevchenko, the worst of the 2 Shevchenko sisters, beats her. Cynthia Calvillo, again, not really the most impressive win, and then loses to both Viviane Araújo and Macy Barber. That Macy Barber fight, I actually picked Andrea Lee to beat Macy Barber, and I thought I had that one. I thought when it went to the cards, I was like, Andrea Lee's going to get this win as a huge underdog. I thought, that was one of my better picks. And then what happens? The judges give it to Barber. Now, the way I see this one going, if it is anywhere similar to the Barber fight, which I don't think Andrea Lee is going to be able to take down and control Natalia Silva. She actually had control time against Macy Barber, which was interesting to me. But I don't think she's going to be able to have control time against Natalia Silva. I think, if anything, Natalia Silva might be able to have control time against her. And also, the better striker is Natalia Silva. The more dangerous striker is Natalia Silva. So I feel like Natalia Silva, and she also has the finishing upside over Andrea Lee for sure, in my opinion. Although Andrea Lee's never actually been finished before. Well, she's been finished one time by submission, never by knockout. So there is also a potential that Silva finds a finish. I'm not saying it's a huge potential. More than likely, this fight will probably go to the judges, but I think the judges will favor the one that's throwing some of the more, powerful strikes. Silva does throw a lot of kicks. Her actually last fight was you know, two of her last fights, punches and a head kick finish, and then the spinning back kick. That was when Bleda was shooting a takedown, and while Bleda was, in the midst of a takedown, she hit her with the spinning back kick right to the face, and put her away. So Silva is actually very good, improving at only 26 years old, 8 years younger. I have to go with Natalia Silva. Now we get into some of the better fights here. Gerald GM3 Mearshart versus Andre Petrosky. I'm going with Andre Petrosky, although this fight worries me so much because Mearshart, everyone knows what Mearshart does time and time and time again. I've seen it. I watched the Bruno Silva fight, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. This fight right here, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I thought Bruno Silva was going to go out there and absolutely steamroll Gerald Mearshart. I thought that fight was. I thought it was like, I was looking at that and I was like, there's no chance that Gerald Mearshart wins this fight. Bruno Silva is going to go out there and put his lights out. He has 22 knockout wins in his career. Gerald Mearshart's been knocked out so many times. He's been put away in the first round. He's been starched brutally by multiple guys. If you look through his record, like, you can even see how many times he's been starched. He's been look at some of his losses. Ian Heinich, 1 minute knockout. Chimaev, 1 minute knockout. Obviously, the Joe Pyfer fight was also a first round knockout. It's like when you hit Mearshart right on the chin with a right hand in the first round, he tends to go to sleep. I thought the same was going to be true of Bruno Silva. What happens? Bruno Silva actually gets dropped by Mearshart, and Mearshart subs him in round 3. I thought that was insanity. But his next fight after was obviously the Pyfer fight, which I just mentioned, and I was all over Pyfer. I thought that was going to be an easy fight for Pyfer. I said, unless Mearshart can, survive early, which I don't think he would have. I said that was a Pyfer fight all the way. I thought he was better everywhere except for maybe the grappling, and we just found out they had a grappling match, and Joe Pyfer destroyed Mearshart in grappling. So Petrosky training with Joe Pyfer, with those Philly guys, training with Pyfer, Brady, Wells. Who else is at that gym? There's a few other guys at Nurselton, Ruzaboev. So he's training with all those guys. Petrosky is, in Philly, good gym, good grapplers there. I think he has to know that if he gets tired, Gerald Mearshart can absolutely latch up a submission. He does it quite often. If he tires you out, he will look to submit you. But most of the time, Mearshart tiring you out is you throwing bombs at him eating them or trying to survive. And then once he survives early, he tries to finish the fight late in the second or third round. For Petrosky, the one worry I have for him is that he hasn't fought really a great level of competition at all. His level of competition has been honestly really not that great. Aaron Jeffrey, he lost to Aaron Jeffrey, and then against, it doesn't say on his record, but in the Ultimate Fighter, he lost to Brian Battle, won the first round against Brian Battle, and then ended up getting subbed by Battle in the second round. And he won his last four in a row, but Michael Gilmore, Yu Zhang Hu, Nick Maximov, and Wellington Turpin are not a high level of competition. Um, not that Wellington Turpin's terrible. I think Wellington Turpin is definitely like, he's an okay fighter, but Gerald Mearshardt's definitely a step up here. But I do think he's a very winnable fight for Petrosky. He can catch him with the right hand in the first round, put him away just like Piper did. Piper is a much more clean striker, that's for sure. I don't think there's any debate. Petrosky's more of like a wrestler than Piper. Piper's more of a striker as far as MMA goes. But I do think Petrosky has the power to knock out a guy like Mearshart, and even if he doesn't find the knockout, he should be able to outgrapple Mearshart and not get submitted. As long as he doesn't tire out too bad, he does tire a little bit. Petrosky's a very strong guy, built like a tank. So guys like that eventually do tire out a bit. And we just saw his teammate Jeremiah Wells basically dominate Carlson Harris until the third round, until Carlson Harris um, caught Jeremiah Wells and basically choked him unconscious. So is that possible here? Yes, I'm not saying it's impossible, but if Petrosky just minds his P's and Q's, stays calm, stays patient, and stays aware, if his team should be, the strategy for this fight should be, come out early, don't just start throwing overhands and looking to finish. Like, if he just comes out, plays it cool, maybe he even gets some takedowns and tries to wrestle early, controls Mearshart, doesn't let him get off any submissions. He can win this fight via decision. He could possibly find a knockout if he's stays careful. Um, I just think if he like goes all out and tries to finish him early, that's the recipe for disaster. So as long as he has a good game plan here, Petrosky should win. Next fight is Cody Gibson versus Brad Katona. I'm going with Brad Katona. I think Brad is the better fighter than Cody Gibson. Cody Gibson actually is not bad. However, the reason I'm picking Brad simply comes down to the grinding, cardio, grappling type of fight that Brad likes to fight. Brad pushes you to fight his type of fight, similar to Austin Hubbard. So I'll kind of break down both the Katona and the Austin Hubbard fight together in a way. Both Katona and Hubbard are guys that like you to fight their type of fight, is something that is pretty evident. Katona likes you to fight his type of fight by, I think Katona here, if he pushes Gibson up against the cage, makes him cage wrestle, wears him out, takes him down, makes him tired, drains the cardio, I think he can grind out a decision. And I think the same can be said about Austin Hubbard and Kurt Hallball. I think Austin Hubbard, and by the way, both of these guys, Kurt Hallball and Cody Gibson, I believe Hallball's 36. I'll check that. He is 36. And Cody Gibson is also not a spring chicken either. He's 35. So both guys, Kurt Hallball's about to be 37, Cody Gibson 35. Brad Katona and Austin Hubbard are both 31 years old. They're both more in their prime, uh, especially on the side of, a 135er. But I do think Katona and Hubbard more so is a wrestler type, where he, will mix in the takedowns and control time. But I mean, Brad does the same thing, but Brad does like to work up against the cage. Um, I don't want to say like a Neil Magny type of fighter, but he is a type of fighter that it doesn't look the prettiest, but he will grind out those type of wins. And Hubbard, similarly speaking, will do the same against Kurt Hallball, who is a guy that likes to stand there, get into firefights. Gibson and Hallball are going to look to fight, fight these brawls, put on a show, in my opinion. And I think Katona and Hubbard will just be the smarter fighters, the guys that will mix in the wrestling, mix in the grappling, try to work against the cage. Just the guys that are, they don't care if the fans are booing. Oh, it's boring, boring, boring. They're just gonna fight their fight and try to become the Ultimate Fighter winner. And if Brad Katona wins the Ultimate Fighter here, he will be a two-time Ultimate Fighter winner. So a little bit of a 2-1 prediction, but I am going to go with both Brad Katona and Austin Hubbard. Next up is RoboCop Gregory Rodriguez versus Dennis Tululin. In this one, I'm going to go with RoboCop to beat Dennis Tululin. Simply put, RoboCop is the far better grappler than Dennis Tululin, and I think he's a better striker with more power. So I think he's better everywhere than Dennis Tululin. The only problem with RoboCop is his chin. His chin is so questionable because he got knocked out by Bruno Ferreira in the first round. Not that Bruno Ferreira doesn't have power, but just the fact that he decided to stand and trade with him. Maybe it's a bit of a chin problem and also a bit of a fight IQ problem for RoboCop, but he's actually a good fighter. If he had better fight IQ, I think he could have won that fight. And I think that's part of the problem that he has is his fight IQ is just not necessarily the best. But against Dennis Tululin, I don't think it'll matter too much because Tululin isn't really a one-punch knockout threat. I think RoboCop could try to early on, strike, and then as soon as Dennis starts to get comfortable in the striking, mix in some grappling, take him down, submit him, finish him early. I think it's a very realistic possibility that RoboCop finds a finish in the first round, second round. I think he should win this fight without needing the judges. He should finish this fight against Dennis Tululin. Tululin can't really grapple well. He was outclassed in the grappling completely by Jin Young Park. It wasn't even close. Jin Young Park just outgrappled him easily, and Tululin's been outgrappled many times in his career. RoboCop, not that he's watching this video, but his coaches, I'm sure, are going to tell him take the easy road to victory, which is to grapple. So I think he will do that. Even if he strikes, I think he has the ability to knock out or at least beat a Dennis Tululin anyway. Next fight is the headliner of the prelims, and this is actually a very interesting fight to break down because it is the returning Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares. Chris Weidman was a former champion. He's been on for 2 years, though, so the pick is Brad Tavares. The pick is absolutely going to be Brad Tavares. I think Brad is the fighter that has more left in the tank here. I think he is. If Chris is running on empty, Brad is running on a quarter tank of gas. I don't think either of these guys have that much time left in the UFC or in the sport. I just think he's getting older, but he's still with it. I think Chris, I hate to say it because he was a former champion, great wrestler, everything like that, but I think everything's passed him by. He's 39 years old, coming off of a really, really, really bad injury. I don't want to see him get hurt again. I really don't. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see him get knocked out, but I just have a feeling that Brad Tavares is gonna catch him and put him away. Hopefully, if Brad does, catch him and drop him, the ref steps in and Weidman doesn't take too much damage here. But I do think if not that Brad Tavares is much of a finisher, but his fight against, I know he got finished in his last fight, but that was by Bruno Silva. I mean, Bruno Silva would probably knock out Weidman at this point. Dricus du Plessis, that was a year ago. 1 year ago, he had a 29-28 decision against Dricus du Plessis, who is a very, very, elite fighter, as we can tell at this point. He's out next with the Adesanya and Strickland fight. Whoever wins that fight most likely is going to be fighting Dricus du Plessis. So Brad Tavares having a competitive fight with a title for a future title challenger, in my opinion, is certainly a good, not a bad look for a loss at all. and I think Brad has more to give here. I don't think Weidman's going to be able to, take him down. Brad Tavares is known for having good takedown defense, training out of a really good gym, Extreme, one of the best gyms in the sport, in my opinion. I think there's a few gyms that I always, sing the praises for. Extreme Couture is one of them. Someone that's training out of Extreme, I always tend to mention that. Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis, Vittori, Dolidze have trained there. Magomed Ankalaev has trained there. Like, there's been so many high level guys that have been in that gym. Johnny Eblen spent time in there, and Johnny Eblen's a really good wrestler, by the way. For those of you that don't know Johnny Eblen, go watch his. I'm gonna definitely make a breakdown on his fight against Fabian Edwards coming up in September, I believe it is. So I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but regardless of all that, Brad Tavares should beat Chris Weidman. He should have more left. Weidman coming back after a really long layoff. I don't think he's going to be the same guy as he was, uh, and he's been knocked out, 6 times in his career. And I think Brad Tavares can make that 7. So the pick is Brad. The start of the main card opener, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, it is Marlon Chito Vera versus Pedro Munoz. The pick for me is going to be Marlon Chito Vera. I get it. I was, not happy with his performance against Corey Sanhagen. Not at all. His performance against Sanhagen was just he just didn't really get going in that fight. It was a 5 round fight, and it just looked like was he waiting for a 10 round fight? Did he think the fight was 20 rounds? Like, I don't know what was going on with Cheeto there, but he's got to know, like, this is a 3 round fight, and you're fighting Pedro Munoz, who's about to be 37. Pedro Munoz about to be 37 years old against 30-year-old Marlon Chito Vera. Cheeto, this is his last. I'm not maybe not his last chance, but like, if he loses this fight, it's really not a good look for him. Like, he's gonna slide down the rankings even more. If he wins this fight, I could honestly see the UFC skipping over, as much as it sucks to see, because Corey deserves the title shot regardless of who. Well, really, if O'Malley wins, I feel like it would be a really interesting stylistic fight. Once Corey obviously heals up, I know Corey had an injury during the Rob Font fight. So Corey winning that fight, Corey Sandhagen dominating that fight despite his injury is very impressive. However, now that he is hurt, I think if Cheeto, I'm picking Cheeto. I think if he can find a way to win impressively here, I think he might be able to jump the queue simply because, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but if O'Malley wins, the UFC would love to have Cheeto and O'Malley have a rematch. That would be a pay per view, a big seller as far as pay per views go, and I think the UFC would be completely down to have that fight happen. And I think that's what the UFC wants to happen. I'm not saying that's why I'm picking Cheeto. The reason I'm picking him, as far as the actual fight itself goes, is because I think Pedro. I don't want to say he's slowed down a lot because he just beat Chris Gutierrez, but Chris Gutierrez is not doesn't have that same skill set as Cheeto does, in my opinion. I think Cheeto is far more dangerous in his, as far as like finishing ability. Now, neither guy has ever been finished. Cheeto has never been finished, and Munoz has never been finished. But if I were to say someone was to get finished in this fight, if you told me after this fight ended somebody got finished, I would say Cheeto knocks out Munoz. If I had to say, not that I'm predicting that to happen, I think Cheeto probably wins a decision. But if someone finds a finish, I think Cheeto will find a finish over Munoz. He's a younger fighter by what, 6 years. That is a serious, that's something you have to take into account. 30 versus 30, about to be 37-year-old at bantamweight. Like, 37, about to be 37 at bantamweight is that's getting up there in age. You know what I mean? And Cheeto, he has a pretty good track record against guys that are getting up there in age. Davy Grant, Frankie Edgar, Rob Font, and Dominic Cruz, all guys that are like 34, 35 plus. Uh, and he's been doing really well against those guys. I get it. Munoz has never been finished, but Vera, his fight against Davy Grant, I think it could be similar to that in a way, where he gets Munoz in the clinch, starts throwing elbows. I don't think he should play like a leg kick game with Munoz. Does have very good leg kicks, but I think if Cheeto makes it a dog fight, makes it just a scrap, I think there is a very realistic possibility that he can cut open Munoz. He can, land some more of the significant strikes, more of the strikes that catch the judge's attention. And I think even if it does go the distance, he'll probably lose the first round, but he should be able to, scrape the next two away and win the fight. So that is what I'll go with. Um, Him being a 2-1 favorite or thereabout against Munoz is like a little bit like I think it's a close fight. If neither guy finds a finish, which is very, 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 very likely because neither guy's ever been finished, if it goes to the judges, this could be a really razor close fight. But I got to go with Cheeto. I just have that feeling that he knows like he's got to be more active in this fight. He's got to push more. He's got to he can't wait. If he waits too long, he's going to lose a decision. So I think he's got to know that in his head. So next fight, Mario Bautista. And by the way, I'm going. I said after the Corey fight, I was I'm done picking him, but I think that fight is just a stylistic matchup that he can win. Um, Mario Bautista versus Damon Blackshear. I'm going with Mario Bautista. Actually, I think Blackshear is a good fighter. I'll say that right away. I think Blackshear is a good fighter. I just think Mario Bautista is, he was scheduled to fight on this card for a while. Blackshear's taking this fight. He just had a fight a week ago against Jose Johnson. I know it says 2 days ago, but he just had a fight last weekend against Jose Johnson, and now he's fighting, a week later, 7 days later, against Mario Bautista, who's going to push the pace, who's going to have the grappling, who's going to be good in the striking, going to throw a lot of volume. I think this is a mistake for Blackshear. I'm not saying that it's a lock for Batista. There's no such thing as a lock, and I mean, unless you're talking about there's certain fights you can call a lock, but this fight is certainly not a lock. As much as I think Batista should win, Blackshear does have the skill set to get it done, but I do think Batista, Blackshear's taking this. He has to cut weight back to 135. Cutting weight back to 135 after just cutting weight a week prior is taxing on the body, is really hard to do. I think Batista's going to come in there, rip the body. If I was the coach of Mario Batista at MMA Lab, which is the same gym that O'Malley's training out of, I would say go in there, rip the body, just hunt the body, hunt the body, hunt the body, because somebody that cut weight twice in 2 weeks is going to be, if you start ripping body shots, they're going to get tired. They're going to start, it's going to be rough on them to be able to make it through the whole fight. And if they start getting tired, not only can you rip the body and start putting volume out there, you can also shoot takedowns. And Batista could also have some success in the grappling. So that's my prediction. I think Mario Batista, will fight this very smart. I think he'll mix in grappling, mix in wrestling, and he'll throw a lot of volume, including combinations to the body, which he usually does anyway. So the pick is Mario Batista. Featured fight of the night here is Neil Magny versus Ian Machado Gary, that is. I'm going with Ian Gary here. Gary, let's just be honest, Neil Magny is a gatekeeper to the elite, and Ian Gary, I think, is an elite fighter. I think Neil Magny, he almost lost to Phil Rowe, by the way. That Phil Rowe fight was awfully close, Neil Magny. That fight, I wouldn't have been mad if that would have went to Phil Rowe. I actually picked Phil Rowe, and that I honestly could have seen Phil Rowe winning that fight. I thought it was really, really close. Neil Magny just held him against the cage. Phil Rowe, if Phil Rowe had any fight IQ, he would disengage and start throwing at range and boxing against Neil Magny because he actually could have won the fight clearly if he would have done that. I think Ian Gary has a higher fight IQ. I think Ian Gary knows what he has to do to win this fight. I think Ian Gary will go out there, will not get held up against the cage by Magny. I think he'll throw combinations. Ultimately, I think he's just a better overall fighter than Neil Magny. I think Magny, he needs to fight his style of fight to win. And if he can't do that, he usually doesn't win. And I just don't think he'll be able to do that here. I don't think he'll be able to just push Ian Gary up against the cage. In the grappling, I think Gary is probably a better grappler on the mat than Neil Magny. I just think this is a clear-cut fight for Ian Gary. The fight against Jeff Neal was a lot more competitive, in my opinion. I thought that was a lot more interesting because of the power that Jeff Neal possesses, the boxing that Jeff Neal possesses. But this fight, I think, is clear-cut Ian Gary all the way. It's not like Neil Magny has a lot of finishing upside either, so this should be an Ian Gary spot, a highlight reel finish. I'm going to say he said second round, so I'll roll with him and say second round for Gary. Uh, First round could be a bit of a feeling. Honestly, I could see a finish coming in the first round as well. I just don't think Neil Magny's taking this fight on like 2 weeks' notice. Yeah, I don't see it happening for him. He's been submitted quite a few times before. I don't think he's been knocked out too many times, but he's only been knocked out twice. But this could be the third time as well. So we'll see. But I am going to go with Ian Gary to get it done. One of the clear picks of the night. Co-main event here is a good fight, but one that I think is, should be pretty clear as well. Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos. I'm going with Weili. I think that Amanda Lemos has a shot early. I do definitely think there is a chance that she does find like a knockout or an early sub if she immediately goes for it. But if she doesn't, I think the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Weili, the more it favors the fight style. Excuse me, the fight style that Weili has over Amanda Lemos. Lemos, I don't really find her to be the most technical fighter. She makes mistakes. A lot of her punches are very like wild, and she throws hooks coming from like left field and right field, and she just swings heavy. Wei Li is much more technical. I think she's the cleaner fighter overall. I think for Lemos got standing arm triangled by Andrade, which is such a bad look to have. Not losing Andrade, but getting standing arm triangled is like it's not what a champion like. Champions don't get standing arm triangled. You know what I mean? Uh, her last two fights was Michelle Waterson Gomez. She beat her. Michelle Waterson's not a championship level fighter. Marina Rodriguez. She finished Marina Rodriguez. After it was a 1-1 going into the third. She ended up finishing her in the third round. And I just think like Virna Jandiroba just beat Marina Rodriguez as well. Like it's one of those things where it's like I don't know. Her wins to me are not that great. Does have a good record, like 13-2-1. But if you just look at her wins, they just haven't really aged well. Marina Rodriguez, Waterson, Angela Hill by split. That was a year and a half ago, and then before that, Montserrat Ruiz. Like none of those wins are really like impressive to me. Whereas Wei Li, Carla Esparza, she beat Carla Esparza in Carla's own game, dominated her on the mat, beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk, finished her. Before that, had two fights against Rose Namajunas, got knocked out, but then lost a split decision, a very, very close fight against Rose. And then 3.5 years ago, beat Joanna by split in a very, a fight for the ages, one of the best fights ever. So, yeah, I'm going with Wei Li. Also Lemos is a little bit older. I just don't think this is the girl to beat Whaley, in my opinion. Not that it's impossible, because Amanda Lemos does have the power to really rock and hurt Whaley, but I think part of the reason why Whaley got knocked out by Rose, like, head kicks are one of those things where it's like, head kicks are, it's hard. Like, head kicks are different than punches that are coming from, a mile away. Head kicks sometimes are very hard to read versus, punches coming from left field and right field, some big winging shots that I think Whaley will be ready for. So, and I do think Whaley will have the cardio edge if this does get in the later rounds as well, as I mentioned. So this should be a Whaley fight, and I'm going to go with her to win. And lastly, moving on to the main event of the evening, Aljamain Sterling versus Sugar Sean O'Malley. I'm doing it. I'm picking Sean O'Malley to become the new bantamweight champion of the world. Sean O'Malley to beat Aljamain Sterling, and I'll tell you guys why I'm predicting this to happen. This is the fight, there's been a lot of fights on this card that I'm interested in watching. As I've said, this is a very, very good fight card, especially the main card. But this fight, Sean O'Malley he's a big underdog, a 2-1 underdog here. But when I look at this fight, I see, yes, Aljo does have the grappling. He does have the ability to, you know, jump on someone's back and backpack them, get that, body triangle locked in. And once he does take your back and lock in the body triangle, you basically lose a round right away. Or he either submits you or you lose a round immediately. So very, very dangerous, very good in his grappling, especially when he takes your back. But he is not the striker that Sean O'Malley is. Sean O'Malley is far better in the striking. Sean O'Malley's striking is way more crisp, way more clean, way more dangerous. He has more tools in the toolbox in the striking. I think his movement is better. I think if he does utilize his movement well here, it'll be hard for Aljo to grab a hold of him, which is what he wants to do. And if Aljo starts shooting desperation takedowns, that's when O'Malley can start to gain confidence and let his hands go more and more. And Aljo does get tired. O'Malley, he could get tired because this is his first, full 5-round fight. But I just think that, once Aljo, if he can't get those takedowns, what's going to happen? That's what my mind keeps wrapping around to. If Aljo shoots, these takedowns from across the cage or tries to, take down O'Malley, and O'Malley, stuffs the takedowns, what's going to happen if they, continue fighting on the feet? And I think that Aljo is going to be in a world of trouble, and he's going to be in a world of trouble. I think he, honestly could be finished by O'Malley here. I think there's definitely a possibility that that happens. I think O'Malley is really live for a finish. Even if he doesn't finish him, if this does go to the scorecards, damage trumps control time at this point. We know that. We know the rules state that damage is the number one criteria. So even if Aljo, let's say the start of the round, O'Malley lands some, big significant strikes, and then with like 2 minutes left, Aljo, hops on his back and gets the body triangle, the round might go to O'Malley based off of damage. So you have to take that into account as well. I'm not saying that this is a clear fight for either side. I think there is a way that Aljo can win the fight, certainly with his grappling, but I think the underdog in O'Malley is just too big to not take. So I'm going with Sean O'Malley. I think he should move. Like, he has to move. He has to stay moving. If he stay stationary, Aljo's gonna shoot. You know, wrap his arms around him, take his back, and lock in the body triangle, and that's a round gone already. So I think O'Malley, stay smart. I think he's been training this for a while with his coach Tim Welch. He's got good grapplers in his camp. I know he's got to be drilling the back takes and how to avoid them, drilling all this stuff over and over and over. He's got to have knees up the middle ready. He's got to have front kicks ready. And I think those are also two weapons he could have. Those front kicks up the middle, knees up the middle for if Aljo shoots. Um, I think he's ready for this fight. I think he's well prepared. And I think Sean O'Malley will be your new bantamweight champion after Saturday night. So those are my predictions for UFC 292, Sterling versus O'Malley in Boston at the Garden. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.